At 55, Mary Collins never imagined her world could break in a single moment, but it did. She stood at the top of the stairs that morning, frozen in place as she listened to her daughter below. Earlier, she had smiled to herself when she heard Emma whisper to her husband, "Mom thinks we're planning a surprise party, isn't that sweet?" But minutes later, Mary heard Emma's true voice, cold and sharp, saying, "Once she's gone, we can finally renovate this old house and sell it for a real profit." Mary clutched the railing, her restored hearing catching every cruel word. For 3 years she had lived in silence, but today the truth was louder than anything she had ever known. Just 3 years ago, Mary lost her hearing in a terrible accident that almost took her life. Doctors told her it was permanent, that her nerves were too damaged for any hope of recovery. So she learned to survive in her silent world, reading lips, writing notes, and pretending the quiet didn't hurt her. Then 2 weeks ago, Dr. Harris called with unbelievable news. "Mary, the experimental surgery worked," he said. "Your hearing is fully restored." She cried that day, cried louder than she ever thought she would again. And she decided she would surprise everyone at her birthday party, especially Emma, by revealing she could hear again. But that morning, as she listened to Emma in the kitchen, her hopeful plan shattered. Emma thought Mary was asleep upstairs when she spoke with her husband, Mark. "How much longer do we have to keep pretending we care?" Mark complained loudly. "The weekly visits, the fake smiles, this is exhausting." Emma sighed as she wiped the dishes. "Just until the will is settled. The doctor said she could have complications any time. We need to be patient." Mary leaned against the hallway wall, her heart breaking with each word. She felt the world she trusted slipping out from under her feet. Mary quietly returned to her bedroom and sat on the edge of her bed, trembling. She had always believed Emma's kindness was real, the visits, the errands, the warm hugs. Now she saw everything differently. When her phone rang, she almost didn't answer. But the cheerful voice on the other end made her chest tighten. "Mom. Just checking in about the party. Are you excited?" Emma asked brightly. Mary forced her voice to stay steady. "Yes, dear. Very excited." Emma continued happily, "We've invited the neighbors and some of your old friends. Mark even made a playlist of your favorite songs." Songs Mary had not heard for 3 long years until now. Then Emma's tone shifted, becoming soft and falsely gentle. "Mom, after the party, we should talk about your living situation. This house is getting too much for you. Mark and I found a lovely assisted living home." Mary closed her eyes as she listened. She finally understood that her daughter wasn't planning her birthday, she was planning her exit. When the call ended, Mary sat in the quiet room, listening to her house for the first time in years. The ticking clock, the humming fridge, the footsteps downstairs, all reminders that her daughter and son-in-law were waiting for her to die. But they had made one mistake, they thought she was still deaf. They had no idea Mary could hear again. And now, she planned to use that gift to uncover every truth they tried to hide. The next morning, Mary went into her garden to cut the roses she loved so much. As she worked, she heard Emma's voice drifting through the open kitchen window. "No, Mom can't hear anything," Emma said casually on the phone. "The accident completely destroyed her hearing. She has no idea what we're planning." Mary froze behind the rose bushes, gripping her gloves tightly. Emma continued, "The surgery could have delayed complications. If something happens after the party, it would look natural." Mary felt her heart drop. Her own daughter was planning for her death as calmly as discussing the weather. Emma's voice kept drifting out the window, each word cutting deeper. "Mark has been researching medications," she whispered. "Nothing traceable, just something that will mix badly with her prescriptions." Through the leaves, Mary saw her daughter pacing in the kitchen, the same room where Mary had taught her to bake cookies as a child. "The house is worth $800,000 now," Emma continued. "Plus her insurance. We're looking at over $1 million." Mary's stomach twisted as she realized Emma had been studying her health, her pills, and her will like a business project. That afternoon, Emma came for her usual visit, smiling warmly as she stepped inside. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today?" she asked sweetly. Mary kept her voice soft, pretending to be the same fragile woman Emma thought she controlled. "Some days are better than others," Mary said. Emma's eyes brightened with fake concern. "Are you having more headaches? You mentioned them last week." Mary hadn't mentioned headaches at all, and she recognized the trap. "A few," Mary lied, watching Emma's hopeful expression tighten. Her daughter wasn't checking on her health, she was checking the progress of her plan. Emma sat across from Mary and leaned forward with a gentle smile. "Mom, maybe after your party we can visit that assisted living place I found. They even have a memory care unit." Mary smiled back, matching Emma's tone perfectly. "That sounds nice, dear. You always know what's best." After Emma left, Mary sat alone in the quiet house, listening to the sound she had missed for years. The ticking clock now felt like a countdown. She understood for the first time that Emma had been slowly shaping a story about her mental decline. But Mary wasn't declining, she was preparing. That evening, Mary picked up her phone with steady hands and called someone she trusted more than anyone, her lawyer, Henry Ward. When he answered, his voice was warm. "Mary, your surgery was a success, I hear. How wonderful." She didn't waste time. "Henry, I need to see you tomorrow. Privately. And you must not tell Emma." Henry immediately grew concerned. "Mary, is something wrong?" Mary stared out her window at the roses glowing in the fading light. "Everything is wrong," she said quietly. "But I have a plan to make it right." And with that call, Mary's fight for her life truly began. The next morning, Mary sat across from Henry in his quiet office, sunlight spilling across his desk. She told him everything she had overheard, Emma's lies, the plan to change her will, the dangerous talk of medications. Henry listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Mary," he finally said, leaning forward, "Sarah came to see me 3 weeks ago." Mary stiffened. "Why?" Henry sighed. "She asked specific questions about your will. She wanted to know how quickly assets could transfer after your death." Mary felt the room tilt, realizing Emma had been preparing long before she even regained her hearing. Henry opened a folder filled with papers. "She also asked about challenging a will if your mental state was questioned," he said. "She hinted you might be losing memory." Mary closed her eyes as the truth washed over her. Emma had been building a story for months, painting her as a confused, declining woman. "Henry," Mary said quietly, "she wanted to make me look incompetent so she could control everything." Henry nodded. "Mary, do you want to change your will?" She looked down at her hands, the same hands that once held Emma through every childhood fear. "Yes," she whispered. "I want major changes." For the next hour, they discussed possibilities. Mary did not want revenge just for the sake of bitterness. She wanted justice. Henry suggested creating a trust to help families facing medical emergencies, something meaningful, something that reflected her years as a nurse. "Emma can receive something modest," Henry explained. "But the majority will go to people who genuinely need it." The idea warmed Mary's heart. "Yes," she said. "Let my life help someone else's." But she added one condition. "Henry, we must keep this secret. I need to see how far Emma is willing to go. I need to know the truth about my own daughter." Henry looked troubled. "Mary, if you're right about their intentions, you could be in danger." But Mary shook her head. "I'm already in danger. The difference now is that I can hear every lie, every whisper." As she left Henry's office, she felt a new strength rising inside her. For years she had moved through a silent world, dependent on others. But now she walked with purpose, determination, and clarity. She wasn't the helpless woman Emma believed she was. She was the woman who had survived an accident, survived betrayal, and now planned to protect her future. That evening, Emma called again with her usual warm voice. "Mom, I organized all your pills into a special container for the party," she said. "This way everything is easier for you." Mary's stomach tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "That's very thoughtful, dear." Emma continued, "Also, Mark suggested we set up a little resting area in the kitchen where you can take your medicine privately." Privately, away from witnesses. Mary forced a soft laugh. "You two think of everything." When the call ended, she stood alone in her kitchen, staring at the roses outside. Emma believed she held all the power. But Mary was preparing for a reveal that would shatter every lie. The morning of the party arrived with gray skies and a cool breeze. Mary watched from her bedroom window as Emma and Mark arrived early. They moved with practiced coordination, Mark unloading boxes, Emma rushing toward the house with an insulated bag. "I brought all your medications, Mom," Emma said cheerfully as Mary opened the door. "Everything is labeled perfectly." Mary kept her expression gentle, but inside she studied every detail. The bag. The nervous excitement. The way Mark stood too close, watching her. They believed today was the beginning of the end. But Mary planned to rewrite their ending completely. As the morning went on, Mary observed everything with sharp, restored senses. Mark tested every chair, making sure she sat where they wanted. Emma arranged her pills on the counter with exaggerated care. "Mom, make sure you take these at the right time," she instructed. Guests soon began arriving, neighbors, old nursing friends, church members. Everyone hugged Mary warmly, saying, "You look wonderful, and how amazing that the surgery worked." But Emma was always nearby to whisper, "She gets tired easily," or "Her recovery has been difficult." Mary realized Emma was still shaping the narrative, a woman growing weaker, not stronger. Later in the afternoon, Emma approached her with 2 pills in her hand. "Mom, these are important," she said softly. "Dr. Harris said you must take them exactly now." Mary studied the pills, different colors, different shapes. She pretended confusion. "What are these for?" Emma smiled patiently. "The white one is for blood pressure. The other is for your brain health." Brain health, so convenient for a story about confusion or decline. "Let me eat first," Mary said. Mark jumped in quickly. "Of course. We want you comfortable." Emma checked her watch nervously. Their plan depended on timing. Mary ate slowly, then pretended to swallow the pills before slipping them into her sleeve. Mary excused herself, flushed the pills, and returned to the living room. Emma watched her closely, waiting for symptoms that would never arrive. So Mary began her performance. A stumble here. A confused pause there. Soft complaints about dizziness. Emma's face lit with false concern. "Mom, maybe you should sit down," she said gently. Guests looked on with sympathy, unaware of the trap unfolding. Mark hovered nearby like a guard. The performance continued until guests began preparing to leave. "I don't feel well," Mary said, her voice trembling just enough. Emma and Mark exchanged a quick, excited glance. They believed the poison was working. As Mary swayed, Mrs. Parker, the retired nurse next door, stepped forward. "Those symptoms aren't normal. Let me check your blood pressure." Emma panicked. No, she just needs rest." But Mrs. Parker ignored her. The reading showed perfect health. Confusion spread through the guests. "Emma," Mrs. Parker said, "what pills did you give your mother?" Emma hesitated, trapped. Mary took a deep breath. It was time. She stood straighter, her voice suddenly strong. "Everyone, I have an announcement. I can hear again. And I've heard everything for the last 2 weeks." The room fell silent as Emma's world began to collapse. The silence after Mary's announcement felt heavy, like the whole room stopped breathing. Emma stared at her mother with wide, terrified eyes. "Mom, what do you mean?" she whispered. Mary looked straight at her. "I mean I've been able to hear everything for 2 weeks, every word you and Mark said in my kitchen, every plan you made about my death." Guests gasped. Mark stepped back toward the door, his face pale. Mrs. Parker crossed her arms and said firmly, "I think we all need to hear the truth now." The mask Emma wore for years finally began to crack. Emma tried one last desperate attempt to save herself. "Mom is confused," she said loudly. "The surgery caused side effects. She's imagining things." Mary shook her head slowly. "No, Emma. I recorded you." Gasps rippled through the room. Mary pulled out her phone and pressed play. Emma's voice filled the living room. "The house is worth $800,000. If something happens after the party, it will look natural." Guests froze, horrified. Mark made a sudden dash toward the back door, but Mrs. Parker blocked him with surprising speed. "You're not going anywhere," she snapped. Mary finally saw the daughter she never wanted to believe existed. Before anyone could speak, police sirens echoed outside. Mary lifted her chin. "I called them right before I made my announcement," she said calmly. "I wanted this to end safely." Emma's face crumpled as 2 officers stepped through the doorway. "Ma'am," one officer said, We need to speak with you about evidence of attempted poisoning and conspiracy. Emma burst into hysterical sobs. Mom, please. You don't understand, we weren't really going to do it. Mary felt her heart ache, but the memory of Emma discussing her death like business burned stronger. Emma, she said quietly, you already did it. You just didn't finish. The officers examined the pills Mary had saved, placing them carefully into evidence bags. Mark tried to deny everything. It was just supplements, he shouted. The officer simply replied, we'll let the lab decide that. When they escorted Emma toward the door, she looked back at her mother, her voice breaking. Mom, I'm your daughter. Please forgive me. Mary swallowed hard. I raised you with everything I had, she said. But you chose greed. You chose this path. Emma was led outside, her sobs fading. For the first time in days, Mary felt the house breathe again. After the last police car pulled away, the remaining guests stood in shocked silence. Mrs. Parker stepped beside Mary and touched her hand gently. You were brave today, she said. Braver than anyone should ever have to be. Mary nodded slowly, feeling exhaustion settle into her bones. I never wanted this, she whispered. I just wanted my daughter to love me. Mrs. Parker squeezed her hand. Sometimes love isn't what we think it is. Sometimes survival is the real victory. As guests drifted out with quiet goodbyes, Mary stood alone in her living room, surrounded by decorations meant for her birthday, a celebration that had turned into a battlefield. 3 days later, Mary sat inside Detective Morgan's office, staring at a thick file on his desk. Mrs. Collins, he said gently, what we found goes far beyond what you heard. He showed her documents, withdrawals from her account, online searches about poisoning, and even legal drafts Mark wrote about placing her under conservatorship. They were planning to make you appear mentally incompetent, the detective explained. Mary felt her breath catch. They wanted to take my house, my savings, my independence. Detective Morgan nodded. And according to our timeline, they would have succeeded within weeks if you hadn't regained your hearing. Mary leaned back, stunned as the detective continued. There's more. Mark has a criminal pattern. He was involved in a similar situation with his previous girlfriend's elderly mother. Mary closed her eyes as a cold wave washed over her. So Emma didn't just make a mistake, she whispered. She joined someone who knew how to do this. Detective Morgan nodded. It appears Mark pushed the plan. But Emma participated. Mary rubbed her hands together, feeling the betrayal all over again. I always taught her to be honest, she murmured, but she learned something very different when I wasn't looking. The detective's voice softened. Mrs. Collins, we need to discuss your safety. Mark may have connections. We discovered he owes a large gambling debt. Dangerous people might be involved. Mary stiffened. So I'm still not safe. He shook his head. For now, it's best you stay somewhere secure. Mary left the station with a heavy heart. She loved her home, but now it felt like a trap filled with shadows. That night, she checked into a small hotel under a different name, just as the police instructed. As she sat on the bed, she whispered to herself, my own daughter, how did we get here? But safety didn't last long. The next morning, Mary received a text from an unknown number. Your daughter wants to talk. Come meet her. She frowned, confused. Another message followed with a photo of her house, fresh, with police tape still hanging. We know where you live. Her hands shook as she called Detective Morgan, who answered immediately. Leave now, he said firmly. Pack your things and come to the station. As she stuffed her clothes into a bag, Mary realized something terrifying. Someone else wanted what Emma and Mark wanted. And this time, they weren't pretending to care. Instead of going straight to the station, Mary made a different decision. She wanted answers from the one person who might still give them. She drove to the county jail and requested to see Emma. When Emma entered the visiting booth, she looked tired, pale, and stripped of her confident charm. Mom, she said weakly, thank you for coming. Mary didn't waste time. Who is threatening me, Emma? She asked. Emma blinked. Threatening? Mom, I don't even know where you are. I haven't told anyone anything. Mary studied her daughter's face carefully and saw real fear there, fear not of justice, but of someone else entirely. Mary leaned closer to the glass, studying every flicker in Emma's eyes. "Emma, someone sent me a picture of my house and warned me to meet them. They knew too much." "Who are they?" Emma swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "Mom, it's Mark's debt. He owes money to dangerous people. They were pressuring us for months." Mary's heart pounded. Dangerous people? Emma nodded miserably. $200,000, Mom. They called day and night. They threatened us. Mary felt the pieces click together. Emma hadn't just chosen greed, she had chosen fear. But fear did not erase the betrayal. Emma wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "Mark gave them details about your house, your insurance, your savings. He told them everything. He said your inheritance could save us." Mary stared at her daughter in disbelief. "So you were going to kill me, to pay Mark's debt?" Emma's face crumpled. "Mom, I thought I had no choice. They said they would hurt us if we didn't pay." Mary's voice stayed calm, even though her heart stung deeply. "You always had a choice, Emma. You just didn't choose me." For the first time, Emma lowered her gaze like a child ashamed of her own shadow. Mary walked out of the jail with a storm of emotion swirling inside her, anger, sadness, and a strange sense of clarity. She could not save Emma from choices already made. But she could save herself. Instead of hiding, Mary decided it was time to end this threat completely. She returned to the police station and told Detective Morgan everything Emma had revealed. He listened carefully and then said, "Mrs. Collins, we can use this. If those men expect money, we can lure them out." Mary nodded slowly. "Then let's do it. I'm tired of running from people who think I'm weak." The plan was dangerous, but necessary. Mary would arrange a meeting with the debt collectors and offer to pay what Mark owed. The police would surround the area, gather evidence, and arrest them. "You will not be alone for a second," Detective Morgan promised. The next evening, Mary sat in a quiet restaurant with a briefcase full of marked bills. Her hands trembled only slightly. At exactly 7 o'clock, two men walked in, sharp suits, cold eyes, and confidence carved from years of intimidation. "Mrs. Collins," one said, "you have the money?" Mary lifted her chin. "I have something better, a final answer." The taller man leaned closer, a thin smile curling on his mouth. "Your son-in-law talked too much. We know everything about you. You're paying tonight, or we collect in other ways." Mary kept her face steady. "Collect?" "By threatening an old woman alone in her home." The men exchanged annoyed glances. "We don't like delays," the second man growled. Mary sighed softly. "Well, then you really won't like this." She tapped the briefcase once, and Detective Morgan appeared from behind the corner with 6 officers. "Police. Nobody move." The men tried to run, but officers quickly pinned them to the floor. Mary exhaled slowly. Another piece of the nightmare was finally over. After the arrests, Detective Morgan walked her to her car. "Mrs. Collins, you were incredibly brave tonight." Mary smiled sadly. "No. I was simply tired of being hunted." He nodded with respect. "With those men in custody, the threat to you is gone. Mark and Emma will face trial. You can finally breathe." Mary looked up at the sky, feeling the weight on her chest soften. "Maybe for the first time in years," she whispered. She knew her life had changed forever, but she also knew she had survived something meant to destroy her. That mattered more than anything. Weeks passed, and the trial moved quickly. Mark pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. Emma, tearful and trembling, accepted her punishment: 3 years for conspiracy, theft, and attempted harm. Mary watched from the back of the courtroom, her face unreadable. When Emma was led away, she paused and whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry." Mary gave a single nod. "I hope one day you mean that," she replied softly. She felt no hatred, only disappointment and acceptance. The daughter she raised was gone, replaced by someone shaped by fear, greed, and bad choices. Mary could not change that. But she could move forward. When everything settled, Mary made a bold decision. She sold the house filled with painful memories and moved to a small coastal town a few hours away. Her new home was quiet, peaceful, and filled with sunlight. Each morning, she drank coffee on the porch while listening to ocean waves crash against the shore. The simple joy of sound felt like a miracle every day. She created a small foundation with the money she saved, helping families who struggled during medical emergencies. It gave her purpose. It gave her healing. And for the first time in a long time, Mary felt whole. Emma wrote letters from prison, always asking for forgiveness, always promising she had changed. Mary read every letter carefully. Some sounded sincere. Some sounded desperate. But Mary did not rush forgiveness. Healing took time. Trust took even longer. She wrote back only once, "Emma, I hope you learn from this. I hope you find yourself again." And with that, Mary released the burden she carried for years. She wasn't the powerless woman Emma thought she could manipulate. She was a survivor who rebuilt her life from ashes. She walked with strength now, quiet, steady, unshakable. On a warm afternoon, Mary stood on a small cliff overlooking the water. The wind brushed her hair, carrying the endless sound of waves. She closed her eyes and listened, really listened. The world was alive again in her ears. The accident that once stole her hearing had unknowingly protected her, and the miracle that restored it had saved her life. She breathed deeply, whispering to herself, "I'm still here." Not as the woman waiting for others to guide her, but as a woman who chose her own ending. A woman who survived betrayal, danger, and fear. And as the ocean roared below, Mary Collins finally stepped into the peaceful future she had earned.